All right, this is the second segment. And Larry, you were finishing up with something you were reading, and as we now go into the second segment, is there anything you want to say with regard to that, or are you going to continue this?
Well, basically, I was just talking about the German interest in the Arab world during World War II was really started in the First World War. The Kaiser had wanted to bring them into the fold because of the presence of oil in that region of the world, and that was part of their scheme for domination, world domination. And now I want to talk about the Arab world again, and in particular talk about a very famous Nazi who was involved in Egypt right after World War II. His name was Otto Skorzeny. Again, I'm going to use the book Unholy Alliance by Peter Levenda and talk about Skorzeny. The flashy neo-Nazi groups of Latin America perform a very valuable service for the old war criminals in hiding. They take the public's political temperature, so to speak, while at the same time taking the heat off the Comraden work. And a major player in that underground Nazi network, the rat line par excellence, was Otto Skorzeny. Skorzeny's career as the creator of Hitler's elite commando force, trained in foreign languages, sophisticated weapons, and demolition devices, various forms of aircraft, including experimental planes and combat and assassination techniques, is celebrated all over the world. It was Skorzeny, after all, who performed the impossible rescue of Benito Mussolini from under the nose of his captors. It was Skorzeny who dressed members of his force in American uniforms in one of the last battles of the war and thus contributed to many American deaths by means of this artful deception. And it was Skorzeny who inherited the responsibility for maneuvering the stolen Nazi art treasures out of Germany in occupation hands into Spain, Portugal, and eventually to South America. These art treasures formed the capital with which Skorzeny financed Die Spinne, his version of the Odessa, the organization of former SS officers, and with which he aided the escape and survival of many of his former colleagues, including but not limited to Eichmann and Mengele. Skorzeny never stood trial at Nuremberg when he was easily one of the most important war criminals ever to survive the occupation. Instead, he made himself useful to American intelligence and later to West German industrialists and reconstituted Nazis enjoying the protection of Adenauer. He figured prominently in Perón's regime in Argentina and was even entrusted with bringing Evita, Perón's body, from Italy to Argentina after the death of her husband. Skorzeny was a fanatic Nazi who kept the pagan faith throughout his career until his death from cancer in 1975. His involvement with the regimes of Farouk and Nasser in Egypt went so far as to include creating an Egyptian Gestapo staffed almost exclusively with former SS officers, a measure that received wholehearted support from CIA Director Alan Dulles, who was at that time involved with Reinhard Gehlen in developing an anti-communist espionage service within the ranks of the CIA. It is evidence of this kind of collusion between the CIA and former SS officers, Nazi financiers, and concentration camp doctors that has given rise to speculation about Nazi mind control methods being developed under CIA auspices in the decades after the war. The commando unit Skorzeny created under Hitler remained largely intact after the war and formed the network of SS men around the world, financed by Nazi money hidden in various European and South American treasuries, that contributes to the survival of Nazi ideology today, more than 50 years after the end of World War II. With so much support being given to these men by various governments, including America's, is it any wonder that Nazism is enjoying a kind of spiritual rebirth all over the world? Estimates range as high as 70,000 former SS officers, members of Hitler's elite Black Order, initiated with pagan ritual into his version of the Masons and Jesuits rolled into one, remained at large after the war. As such, it constitutes one of the largest and best funded, best trained, best equipped, and best connected cults in the world today. And the second generation is being trained and indoctrinated in the streets of London, Berlin, New York, Buenos Aires, and in his secret heavily armed estates, like Colonia Dignidad. That was a kind of an overview of Skorzeny. I was going to talk a little more about him. and in doing so, was going to use a book called The Beast Reawakens, which is one of my favorite titles, by a man named Martin Lee. And he gives a kind of a background of Skorzeny. Otto Skorzeny was a towering 220-pound hulk with broad shoulders, slate gray eyes, and dark, springy hair atop a 6'5" frame. Born in Vienna in 1908, he endured hard economic times as a youth, tasting butter for the first time when he was 15. He studied engineering at the University of Vienna, earning his degree in able fashion while frequenting the local fencing fraternities that affected a tough, freewheeling crowd. Intense and fearless, he loved to fight duels with a Schlager, a sharp-edged sword with a blunt tip. And he said his lean, muscular body boasted 15 scars, including a melodramatic sword slash that cut from the left side of his face from forehead to chin. Stitched on the spot without anesthesia, this disfiguring wound earned him the nickname Scarface. With the onset of World War II, Skorzeny quit his engineering job and enlisted in the Waffen-SS, the most ruthless of all the Nazi forces. Drawn from a cesspool of political fanaticism and honed into military athletes, the crack troops of the Waffen-SS exterminated, plundered, and enslaved their way through Eastern Europe. Their unmatched sadism was the main reason why the Nuremberg Tribunal condemned the SS in toto as a criminal organization after the war. Yeah, and they should have hung Skorzeny, but they didn't. While the victors feasted on the spoils of war, the majority of Germans withdrew into a cocoon of sullen compliance. They became a nation of bowed heads, begrudgingly submitting to their conquerors. Although they had no choice but to admit defeat, most showed little remorse for the crimes of the Third Reich. The deleterious impact of 13 years of Hitlerism on Germany's moral conscience would not be easily undone. The discovery of the concentration camps toward the end of the war strengthened the case of those who argued that little mercy should be shown the Germans. The scope of Nazi cruelty was so enormous, its technical refinement so obscene and systematic, that the Allies began to realize, in the words of the United Nations War Crimes Commission, that many of the criminal acts perpetrated by the enemy were of an altogether novel nature. But there was also a significant number of hardcore Nazis on the loose after the war. They were the prime targets of the U.S. Army counterintelligence corps units that fanned out across the American zone of occupation in southern Germany. The most pressing concern at that outset was rounding up the ideological, committed Nazis who had been marked for automatic detention. Such was the case with SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny, who created quite a stir when he gave himself up to the Americans. Scarface was immediately handcuffed and driven to Salzburg for questioning by 2 CIC officers. As soon as the initial interrogation had concluded, Skorzeny was besieged by journalists who rushed to Salzburg upon hearing that Hitler's legendary commando had been captured. An impromptu press conference generated international publicity. Among those who stood trial in the American zone of occupation was Otto Skorzeny. Hitler's favorite commando faced war crimes charges for his activities during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, when Germany launched a last desperate counterattack in the Ardennes on the Western Front. The Fuhrer had chosen Skorzeny to lead a special mission involving German saboteurs attired in U.S. Army uniforms who infiltrated behind enemy lines and wreaked all sort of havoc. Some of Skorzeny's agents posed as American military police and misdirected Allied traffic. Amid the confusion on a cold winter night, the SS summarily executed 71 captured American soldiers in what has become known as the Malmedy Massacre. Nevertheless, in September 1947, he was acquitted of illegal actions during the Battle of the Bulge, after a British officer testified that Skorzeny had done nothing that his Allied counterparts had not done themselves or attempted. Well, that's a bunch of bull, but anyway. Despite the Dachau verdict, Hitler's ace commando made a lasting impression on Eisenhower, who as President of the United States kept a photo of Skorzeny in the White House office. That I don't understand. But going on and talking about Skorzeny and his effect on the people of Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Egyptian government. July 1953, a brigade of goose-stepping Arab soldiers marched along a wide boulevard in Cairo. They saluted as they passed the grandstand reserved for special dignitaries. Sitting among the honored guests, conspicuous in his dark glasses, was Otto Skorzeny. The Nazi war hero had been invited to inspect the sun-drenched military parade in celebration of the Free Officers' coup that toppled the corrupt Egyptian monarchy 6 months earlier. A key advisor to the new regime's secret service, Skorzeny was held in high regard by Egypt's young revolutionary leaders, including the up-and-coming Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser, considered by many to be the real power behind the secular throne. Ilsa Skorzeny, who often accompanied her husband during his travels to the Middle East, acknowledged that Otto and Nasser were on very friendly terms. When we were in Cairo, they were together a lot, she explained. While visiting Egypt, Skorzeny also kept up his contacts with the burgeoning German exile community that had taken root shortly after World War II. Cairo, like Madrid and Buenos Aires, had become a safe haven for thousands of Nazi expatriates. Many Third Reich veterans found employment with the Egyptian government. Close ties between Germany and the Arab world had been forged initially during the Hitler years, as the Führer's geopolitical experts gave top priority to building up Nazi influence in the Middle East. Even though he loathed Arabs, he once described them as lacquered half-apes who ought to be whipped.
Oof.
Hitler,
Ouch. Ouch.
he's such a nice guy.
Oh.
Hitler was nonetheless the idol of the paramilitary Green Shirts, Egypt's indigenous proto-fascist movement, which referred to him as Abu Ali, the good fighter. King Farouk, who ruled Egypt during the Hitler era, was also a Nazi sympathizer. The king's palace became a rendezvous point for Axis spies and couriers. Members of the royal family were involved in espionage for fascist Italy, and many of the king's mistresses did double duty as Nazi agents.
There you go. Works every time.
Oh, with Rommel's army aiming to wrest Egypt from British colonial rule, German military intelligence stepped up its activities in the land of the Sphinx. Admiral William Canaris, head of the Abwehr, counted upon his confidential agents, two young Egyptian lieutenants, Abdel Nasser and Anwar Sadat, both of whom belonged to a secret officers association known as the Ring of Iron. We made contact with the German headquarters in Libya, Sadat said of his wartime activities, and we acted in complete harmony with them. Imprisoned for 3 years by the British because of his subversive efforts, Sadat would later succeed Nasser as president of Europe. The most influential Arab leader to seek an alliance with Nazi Germany was Haj Amin al-Husseini, the notorious Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, a scion of a prominent Muslim family in British-controlled Palestine. The Mufti fled his native land 2 years before the outbreak of World War II. Lean and intense, this worldly man of letters with a scraggly red beard remained the preeminent religious leader of Palestinian Muslims despite his refugee status. And he goes on to talk about Husseini going to Germany. We've already talked about that. Powerful radio transmitters were put up at the Mufti's disposal so that his inflammatory pro-Axis propaganda could be heard throughout the Arab world. He was also instrumental in organizing a special Muslim division of the Waffen-SS. The Mufti visited these troops regularly, leading them in prayer and exhorting them to fight for Allah. He also blessed Nazi-trained sabotage teams before they were dispatched to Palestine, Iraq, and Transjordan. It became increasingly obvious that the military tide was turning against the Axis. Haj Amin al-Husseini urged Germany and its puppet regimes in Eastern Europe to send thousands of Jews to concentration camps rather than allow them to immigrate to Palestine. It does not appear, however, that the Mufti decisively influenced the Nazis, who needed little encouragement to exterminate more Jews. After the war, the Mufti made his way to Egypt. He settled into a luxurious villa in Alexandria, courtesy of King Farouk. The Mufti's arrival in 1946 was a prelude to a steady stream of Third Reich veterans, including several badly compromised Nazis who chose Cairo as a hideout. One of King Farouk's ministers suggested that former Nazis should be hired as advisors in an effort to upgrade the Egyptian armed forces. Although the king showed little enthusiasm for the proposal, some of the military officers went ahead anyway and secured the services of several German technicians and industrial experts. Most intriguing aspect of the revolt against King Farouk, Newsweek reported, was the role played in the coup by the large group of German advisors serving with the Egyptian army. In other words, the Nazis were behind the coup and gave them information that they needed to pull it off. Mm-hmm. While there was no evidence that former Nazis initiated a coup, according to Newsweek, quote, the young officers who did the actual planning consulted the German advisors as to tactics. The power grab was endorsed by CIA officials who viewed Nasser as a valuable anti-communist ally. One of Nasser's first measures was to crack down hard on the Egyptian Communist Party and imprison its leaders. His henchmen also rounded up several left-wing trade unionists, and after a summary trial, they were hanged. The CIA never gladly assented to Nasser's request for assistance in overhauling the mothballed Egyptian espionage apparatus. Such a sensitive assignment, however, required that American advisors not get their hands dirty, and off-the-shelf style of nation tampering was deemed preferable. So the CIA turned to the readily available Galen org. Turns out that Galen was the one who decided that Skorzeny would be right for the job. After conferring with Dulles, Galen decided the best man for the job was Otto Skorzeny. The CIA chief concurred, confident in the presumption that Skorzeny, an ardent anti-communist, would help solidify Nasser's power base within the Egyptian military. Skorzeny was a particular favorite of American counterintelligence, having made friends with several of his captors before escaping from them, and was believed to be specially suited in temperament and personality for getting along with Nasser. Over the next year and a half, Skorzeny used CIA funds to recruit a slew of SS veterans and other Third Reich luminaries who jumped at the chance to inject new life and expertise into the Egyptian Secret Service. Well, I guess they did, because it helped them get out of Europe where they were probably being hunted. Right. More than 100 additional German advisors were pressed into service under Skorzeny's auspices. Some were drawn from the ranks of neo-Nazi organizations and remnants of the Odessa escape networks that crisscrossed through Madrid. Skorzeny's team included fugitives like SS Major Leopold Gleim, who had been sentenced to death for wartime atrocities committed while he was the Gestapo chief of Poland, and Franz Bunch, a Goebbels propagandist best known for his pornographic book, The Sexual Habits of Jews. Miles Copeland of the CIA took it all in stride. Perhaps someone will one day devise a means for inducing gentlemen of finer sensibilities to become security officers, but certainly no such means were known either by Nasser or his American advisors. That's a good way to kind of sweep it under the rug. Galen notes in his memoirs, Nasser in particular had a great deal of respect for Skorzeny. To the leaders of the Egyptian military, he was the scar-faced master of ambush, the Third Reich's fearless cloak and dagger man, who could out James Bond the best of them. British officials, peeved at their diminishing status in the Middle East, were less sanguine about Skorzeny's presence in Cairo. In a speech before the House of Commons, Prime Minister Winston Churchill warned that the Egyptian army was being aided and trained by Nazi instructors and staff officers in unusual numbers. But an Egyptian spokesman, wondering what the fuss was all about, replied swiftly, Britain herself is using more than 4,000 German experts. The United States is employing several thousand, and many other countries are doing the same. Well, it was true. As more Nazis inundated the Egyptian capital, the posh bars and elite social clubs of Cairo attracted a rogues gallery of SS renegades, Gestapo interrogation specialists, and German rocket scientists, all mingling with fervent Arab radicals, shadowy arms merchants, and Israeli spies. It was a world that Major General Otto Ernst Raymer found irresistible. Raymer also made his way to Egypt in 1953. The Middle East, especially Cairo and later Damascus, would become Raymer's principal theater of operations for the better part of 3 decades. He, too, would be employed by the Egyptian government, serving, in his own words, as a political advisor to Nasser. Joining Raymer in Egypt were several of his associates from the outlawed Socialist Reich Party, including Ernst Wilhelm Springer, who would later be implicated in various gun-running schemes to an Arab clientele. According to West German press reports cited by U.S. Army intelligence, Raymer and Springer offered to set up a new system for policing Europe. This wasn't necessary, as the Nasser government already had several Nazi experts assisting with police work. Prior to World War II, vicious European-style anti-Semitism, as typified by the protocols, was uncommon in the Arab world. While Jews were being discriminated against, they were rarely persecuted. But this began to change when Nazi propagandists assumed key positions inside the 10-story building that housed the information ministry in Cairo. Inevitably, the racialist views of these German expatriates rubbed off on Egypt's leaders, who launched a repressive campaign against members of the local Jewish community, many of whom were expelled from the country after their property and possessions had been confiscated. Such measures were applauded by von Leers and the other European fascists who found favor with Nasser in the mid-50s. Several young Palestinian refugees, including Yasser Arafat, joined the Egyptian soldiers who were learning the ways and means of unconventional warfare. Although initially the intended target was the British, the future PLO chief realized that rigorous commando exercises would help prepare the Palestinian militants who were eager to renew battle for their homeland. A grateful Arafat recognized Skorzany's abundant skills in this area, and the two men struck up a friendship that lasted for years. Apparently the Palestinian leader was quite fond of the Scarface Paladin. Arafat would have done anything for Otto, remarked Ilsa Skorzany. Well, I think you see from here that events of today with the Muslim Brotherhood and the hatred toward Israel all dates back really long before our current time, and was greatly exacerbated by people like Otto Skorzany and other Nazis that came into Egypt and influenced them. And that was the main point behind this, was to show that the Nazi influence in the Middle East and how that it comes down to our present day, that influence is still stirring up trouble.
Do you have in your notes, do you have a date approximate when Arafat made his acquaintance?
I guess the approximate date would be the early 50s, Viz, because I think Skorzany came there in 53. Yeah, there's quite a bit of literature on that. I can get you more information on it. I just don't have it handy right now.
No, I'm just trying to think of his timeline, because, I mean, Arafat did mean a lot to me. I don't know. I guess maybe in the 80s I started paying attention. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I really never knew the history on him. I didn't care about things back then like that. But here again, I also found it very interesting that if you remember, Arafat was pinned down once by the Israelis in that house. And then they get a blown in the kingdom come.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And before I thought things go bump in the night, I thought that interesting. It's like, you got him. Either make him come in or blow him up.
Yeah.
This is it. This is game, set, match. And nothing was done. And I just thought that, like, well, if this guy is such a monster, if he's such an enemy of the Israeli state, what's the problem? Put your hands up and come on out, or see you later. And it didn't happen. And he, continued on, for whatever, his habits allowed him to live for.
Yeah.
Again, I just thought.
Now it was odd. I don't really know what the explanation of that is, but that was a very odd scene. I remember that. Yeah,
but now, of course, where I'm going full bore is that, I'm thinking this is the way the game is played. Can't do this, can do that, can't do this. I never really did realize how much the Nazi effect permeated the Middle East after World War II.
Yeah.
I understood it only in the last 10 years because of work that was done and, works that you read from what was posted on Black Razor and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What was the connection? Because when we look back at World War I kind of never really did understand, what the Germans were doing with the Ottomans. And, of course, they enlisted the Ottomans in, on their side of the World War I conflagration.
Right. One reason they wanted them was because of the control of oil, and that the Ottomans were in control of countries where oil could be found, and that was one of the main concerns. Plus, there was a huge population of people who hated, the enemies of Germany as much as Germany did.
Well, but you also have Britain poking their nose around. The French were down there as well back in the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
It's almost like we all have to be there because we don't want any of you to be there without us.
Well, the thing that always gets me is, like somebody once said, the attitude of the United States about the Arab oil is that, what is our oil doing underneath their desert?
Exactly. And that also plays into not the period you're talking about post-World War II, but that whole episode, that we kind of get some kind of a glimpse into, however it's been skewed, with Lawrence of Arabia.
Right.
And he's down there. It's like there was like a food fight down in the Middle East between Great Britain, France, and Germany.
Right. Well, they set the Arabs up. The British did, tell them they were going to allow, them to, get together, and they were going to help them out, and they were going to help facilitate the uniting of the Arabs, and they had no real intention of doing that. They just went down and carved up the territory along with France.
But that also leads to, I guess, an understanding that, and here we go again with conspiracies, but still, that Lawrence was upset by this and came back and either did a little popping off, or before he could pop off, he had a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, it could just be coincidental, that he had a motorcycle accident, or there's also a good chance that, somebody did knock him off. I think he had too much publicity, and he was really angry and verbal about, his feelings about how Britain had betrayed the Arabs. They had used him to help them attack the Turks and had helped them, accomplish their goals in the Middle East, and then kind of dumped on them.
Yeah, I saw that movie, I don't know how many times, the one with Peter O'Toole.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it like in 63, 64. I couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want?
Yeah, you're a kid.
Yeah, and it's like really long. And I'm like,
Yeah, there's some good fight scenes in it. That's about it.
Well, all I remember is that if there wasn't subliminal advertising in theaters at that time, which I think there was, those shots of that broiling orange sun across the desert, man, I was running to the soda stand like you couldn't believe,
Yeah.
But then later on, watching it again and again, and even of late, of course, they're saying, oh, no, it just was really a motorcycle accident. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
And no one can blame, I'm sorry, you can't blame anybody for wondering about that, because he wasn't going to come home and be a poster boy for the program of Great Britain in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, I believe he realized he had been used as a tool.
Well, it's sure not above the British government to get rid of people that are in the way.
Well, it's not above any governments to get rid of people.
No, not at all. I'm just, in this case, Britain.
I'm thinking back to this last situation I should not have gotten into, about, the comments about, about Pearl Harbor. I'm like, look, governments kill their people when they want to advance something.
They sure do.
And this guy pops off about, we should have known Japan was going to do this. And I'm like, dude, be that as it may, but 2,300 servicemen in Hawaii had no clue.
Know.
Huh?
They did know Japan was coming. They just didn't know the exact date, but they did know they were coming. They had plenty of warning. I mean, it's ridiculous. Even in the 1940s, how in the world can this huge task force go all the way across the Pacific to attack Hawaii without being detected?
Well, somehow,
they had radar reports coming in when the planes were, and the guy said, "Well, just don't, ignore it. It's planes coming in from the mainland." Really? Planes coming in the mainland? They were coming from the southwest?
Well,
that's
right.
Sense.
There was an Air Force sortie that was landing during the time the Zeros were bombing Pearl Harbor.
Right.
I mean that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Oh, whoa, what's this? But it seemed the person seemed to say like, well, that was supposed to happen. We should have known. And I'm like, do you understand that they didn't know, and they were left wide open for that?
Right.
And you want to blame it on FDR, but don't blame it on FDR, because presidents don't make their own decisions. That was told to happen. What's really interesting also, and this plays into World War II in Germany, that with succouring Japan, if that's what you want to call it, into an attack on Pearl Harbor, that automatically meant that when we declared war on Japan, we declared war on Germany and Italy as part of their tripartite agreement, that an attack on one would be an attack on all. Therefore, what's even more heinous about Pearl Harbor was that it wasn't to get into a battle with Japan, it was to get into a battle with Germany, which people in the United States were not up for, after only 20 years of peace.
Right.
And
just the whole idea of going into a world war, unless somebody is a real nut or stands to benefit from that, that's not something you want to deal with. It's just amazing to me that people think all these events are so simple. and they're really much more complicated. And they look on the surface, and there's a lot of political machinations going on behind the scenes.
Plus, we are removed from of 360-degree accounts of the way people felt back then. All we get in the history books is like, yeah, let's go kick their ass. Mm-hmm. And people were not interested in World War I. They were certainly not interested in going to a European conflict in World War II. But, of course, they had to get manipulated to get involved in such. But think about it. I mean, the United States jumped in late in World War I and really expedited the end. But then 1918 to 1941, I mean, what do you got? 23 years of peace, that's it? Mm-hmm. And pretty much the United States knew they were going to get into it by the late 30s with us being involved in Lend-Lease and all that other stuff. So it's just like, how you get people lathered up to go into something like this is hard to believe. But, of course, most of America, you'll never be able to fathom what their beliefs were because they have no voice.
Yeah.
They don't get into the newspapers. They don't get onto the radio back in those days. And we're looking at the same thing now. So I always have to laugh when people say, well, how could they keep that a secret? Well, it really wasn't that much of a secret. It's just that the people who are in opposition never get a platform to voice what, and thereby we have no such thing as freedom of expression. That is a myth.
Right. And ask Visigoth who went on. Who went on Blog Talk Radio and tried to tell the truth, and as best he saw it, and got smashed.
I just said something recently too, which I had forgotten about when we spoke, because a lot of people, weren't aware that ever happened. I mean, that's a while back there. I mean, you were around, but they had known about that until you brought it up, and I got a couple of emails. But I
remember how mad I got, and I don't know, in a way, there's really no reason to get mad about it. I mean, I should have known that was coming. But when it actually happens to you, to a friend of yours, to someone you know and are associated with, then it becomes personal, Well, before it's just theoretical. Then it becomes personal where you see it. It's like, my God, I mean, all the guys, and the show was probably the best one you ever did on 9/11. And that's the one that they knock off the air, and you can't even get a copy of it.
Well, yeah, and I didn't tape it that day.
Yeah.
And
it's a shame. That's a real shame.
Yeah. But, I mean, that was on Flight 93. But I did mention this in a Stuff and Things, and then I had forgotten about this because Jim kind of reminded me, and so did Lady Biz. They're like, what was funny is Blog Talk was ready to feature us as one of the top 10 shows because when we came in, the ratings just spiked. And though they might not listen to the show, they can see who's getting hits. And they were ready for us to come on. Right. And Jim said that's going to happen. So I started looking in those days at what they forwarded as the featured shows, and we weren't there. But I figured, okay, no big deal. And then the next show we did was Flight 93, and bang, that was the end of that.
I mean, your show was really hot in those days. It really was. And there were a lot of other shows that were carrying your stuff, and people were putting, links to your show, and you were getting this is my impression, but you were getting a lot of publicity, amongst alternative media.
Well, the thing that Victor Thorne and Lisa had always said from Wing TV, and I had said this to them, they go, you're right. Nobody did anything about 93.
Yeah.
Jones, the rest of them, all fixated on the WTC, and really not much about the Pentagon.
And all they want to talk about really is the Twin Towers and the planes, and the pancaking effect, blah blah, and they on and on and on about that, and they just keep everybody's
interest there,
yeah, and they won't let it go. And Flight 93 is the third rail. You start talking about Flight 93, and people really want to turn you off. Because that gets down to the nitty gritty,
Well, there were a lot of mistakes making on that one.
Yeah.
And they wanted everybody to focus. They, meaning the government, wanted everyone to focus on really which was a horrible sight at the WTC.
Right.
The Pentagon was a little hairy, and Shanksville was even hairier.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of mistakes that were made, so they don't want people dwelling on 93. So at any rate, we did stuff on that. And, I mean, at the end, as you know, I mean, I just went to the newspapers and took their own accounts.
Right.
And, with contradictions and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I remember the show, and it was. I mean, you had it down, bro. It was like bang, 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 point by point, and it was just really well done. And I think you could probably recreate it, but I mean, maybe not. It was like a real crystallized point in time. It was really well done, and it was just a little too much for them. Maybe a lot too much for them. And I couldn't believe that not only did they take you off the air, period, they took that show off, and I guess deleted it. I mean, and nobody can get a copy of it now. It's almost like it's like Kafka or something, where you're tried without, told what the charges are.
Well, that's kind of the way things are done nowadays.
Yeah.
What was said was that I didn't tape it at the house here.
Yeah.
Off the stream, and it was lost forever. But no, I mean, in fact, Hilltown came on after we did it again, and in fact, thank you for this plug. But I'm going to put out one of the collections, the vintage collections, which are they're paid for. That's the way it is. But I'm going to put out one on 9/11, which is going to cover 60 plus hours.
Well, I would tell anybody in your audience that your stuff on 9/11 is much better than anybody else's that I've heard. And I've heard a lot of stuff over a period of years. I don't even listen to 9/11 stuff anymore. But I mean, compared to some of the garbage that I've heard, your stuff is far and away better. And the people that you have on, don't have any agendas.
Well, no, I mean, we had Key Dudney on. We had the mysterious Michael Elliott, wherever he is, but he did some really good stuff. And in fact, has a chapbook that's still available through Wing TV.
Yeah.
We had Victor and Lisa who went out there because they live in Pennsylvania. They went down there and poked around.
I liked listening to their stuff. They were good too.
And Vinny Sammartino, who lives in Jersey and went to visit the site of Todd Beamer's grave and said, if this guy's a hero, man, this looks like Potter's Field. And we did. We picked a lot of stuff out. We sidestepped all that crap. In fact, all right, look, we were doing this stuff before Fetzer ever got into the game.
Right.
And when those characters got in, for whatever reasons, and I think it were ulterior motives there, everything was pitched that way. So you lose the whole thing. And now, even at this late date, with Jim Kosher's tape, the footage that he recorded and sat on for 10 years, I mean, there again, I mean, you have probably the best running footage of what took place from a distance, so you can see, in other videos you're inside and all that. And I mean, as a documentary, it doesn't cut it because he really didn't do any kind of storyboard.
No.
But just to watch the footage.
It's just a slice of life. It's a stream of consciousness.
I mean, when you take a look at what was going on over there, which we've not seen, I mean, that place was loaded with all kinds of planes and helicopters, So anyway, all I mean is that you get a very good look at it, and then you have these nerds that are saying, "Oh no, that was computer generated." Blah.
Those people are either mentally ill or have some kind of a hidden agenda themselves, because the stuff they're saying is so far out and so idiotic. I just don't get that at all.
Well. I tell you what, there's something I'm planning to do. If I can pull it off in the next couple of months, I will. But nobody will ever be satisfied because these idiots have to believe that they're right. They have actually just turned their back on the world. Jim sent me something where some other jerk is offering like $10,000, I don't know, or $100,000. It doesn't make a difference to prove that anybody's got an unadulterated film. And I'm like, so under whose auspices?
How can you prove that? I mean,
well, the thing is, and how are we going to do this? Are we going to give it to you and you're going to come back and pronounce stuff? You know what I mean? You can't do that. If you want to take somebody independent, but of course then nobody will be happy. So this guy's just running his mouth about this stuff, and it's like, look, a lot of people saw it that day. Sorry,
man.
Man.
What this does? This is exactly what the powers that be, the elites, the New World Order. That's exactly what they want people doing. Is coming up with all these idiotic, crazy theories. Oh, no planes hit the Pentagon. No planes hit the Twin Towers. I mean, give me a break. I mean,
listen.
It's so idiotic. That's what the world looks at. People who are not involved will look at that and go, well, that is just a bunch of conspiracy theory nuts. Anybody that does, that doesn't believe the official story has just got to be some kind of nut. That's what they want. It's just like they did. They perfected the technique with the JFK assassination. They tried to paint anyone who objected to what the government story was. Anybody who didn't buy the Warren Commission was a nut. Well, that's what they've done very successfully, and a lot of these people are paid agents. I mean,
Well, you're right. It's interesting because, as far as I can see, looking back, that the term conspiracy theorist was coined in back of the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
And when those two guys came out with the book, which you can read online, called The Invisible Government, just do a search on that and you'll be able to find it.
I remember the title. I don't think I've ever read it. Well, I know I haven't read it, but
one of the authors' name is Wise. I can't remember what the other one was. But they were just doing what was considered then really heavy-duty stuff. We laugh at it by comparison now, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But so what happened was they come out with the book, which is actually no big aha to a certain extent. However, they got laid into by Time and Newsweek. Branded as conspiracy theorists, and that's when I found it, because I was looking for a review of their book, and I found one in '64, I believe. And they jumped all over him, and I'm like, are you kidding me, dude? That's nothing compared to what really goes on.
Yeah.
So, but that's the way of the world.
And now the new thing to ridicule you is the phrase tinfoil hat wearer.
Oh, yeah, I mean, But
it's like... all this stuff, happened just exactly the way the government told you it did. So, go back to sleep, America, and anybody who says differently is a nut, who's just coming up with some paranoid theories.
Yeah, that's a knee-jerk term now, conspiracy theorists, and everybody's, as soon as you mention something that doesn't work with them, that's what comes to their mind. And It's one of these things I also wrote to this idiot in the comments on YouTube, and that is... And once again, the problem with Americans, they've been propagandized into believing they can't be propagandized.
Right.
And that is watertight, man. I mean, you cannot penetrate that if they're that driven to believe that. And they are, which I find, 1, threatening, 2, frightening, and 3, makes me not want to mess with anybody and just be left alone.
Yeah.
So
it has a tendency to just put you in a state where you can't win, All you can do is put the information out there and hope for the best, but it's very difficult.
But that's why Ibsen's our hero for saying the majority is never right.
Right.
That is the actual true quote. It wasn't the majority is always wrong. It's the majority is never right. And, of course, with Jeffers, who said the cold passion for truth hunts in no pack. Yep. I don't know why that is. It's a percentage thing. It's probably a mathematic, algorithmic thing, but it is the way it is. We don't try to be contrary to ordinary just to be such. It's just that most of the people, it's true. Just put me to sleep, wake me up tomorrow, give me some soma, and I'll go to work. If there are jobs to work anymore, but that's another whole thing.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to pick up with a guy, and we're going to finish on this note. This guy, to me, is probably, if not the most interesting character, well, it's pretty close, second and third. I'm still not sure what his deal was, so lay it on us.
Okay. This is from The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs about Rudolf Hess. Although relegated to a minor footnote in history, the strange case of Nazi Deputy Fuhrer Rudolf Hess in 1941 provides a rare glimpse of the elitist control over events during World War II. The bushy-eyebrowed Hess flew alone to England in May 1941 in an effort to make peace. The conventional view of the Hess flight is that of an increasingly marginalized member of Hitler's inner circle, who sought to regain favor with his Fuhrer by making an unauthorized visit to Britain in hopes of personally negotiating an end to the war and even enlisting England's aid in the fight against Soviet expansionism. Hitler disavowed Hess as insane, while Prime Minister Winston Churchill more kindly described Hess's attempt at a negotiation as a frantic deed of lunatic benevolence. At the Nuremberg trials, Hess was found guilty of crimes against peace and spent the rest of his life as a prisoner in Berlin's Spandau prison. In August 1987, British military authorities announced that Hess had committed suicide, a judgment that continues to be disputed. Several recent studies of the Hess incident show there was a much deeper meaning to the intriguing story, which was only magnified by his sudden and mysterious death. he goes on. Mars goes on to kind of lay out Hess's life, and I'll spare you all that, except to say that he became Professor Haushofer, who was a member of the Vril Society's friend. Haushofer, as a professor at the University of Munich, worked out Hitler's policy of Lebensraum, living space, for a hemmed-in Germany. Although he gained a reputation as the man behind Hitler, Haushofer's views on geopolitics were largely accepted by Hitler, but only after they came from the mouth of Hess. I was only able to influence Hitler through Hess, he told his American captors in 1945. Both Hess and Haushofer first met Hitler at one of the beer hall meetings of the German Workers' Party. When during the aborted beer hall push of 1923, when the new Nazi Party tried to seize power in Bavaria, Hess was at Hitler's side. When the coup failed, Hess drove off to Austria, where he was sheltered by members of the paramilitary wing of the Thule Society. Voluntarily returning to Germany, Hess joined Hitler in Landsberg prison, and after being convicted of conspiracy to commit treason. Due to the political climate at the time, both men were released within a year, and during their months of imprisonment, Hess became a close confidant to Hitler and helped produce Hitler's book Mein Kampf. Hess edited, rewrote, and organized the book so extensively that some researchers believe he should have been credited as co-author. As far as I know, Hess actually dictated many chapters of that book, Haushofer told interrogators in 1945. It is clear that Hess was much more powerful and well-connected than is generally reported. He was the person closest to Hitler, one who shared his aspirations and belief, and on the eve of the war in 1939, Hess was even named the successor to Hitler after Reichsmarshal Hermann Goering. The exceptional power and position of Rudolf Hess demands close scrutiny of his ill-fated flight to England and its consequences. Just such a study was undertaken in 2001 by 3 British officers, Lynn Pinknett, Clive Prince, and Stephen Pryor. It soon becomes apparent that the whole Hess affair from 1941 onward is riddled with so many contradictions and anomalies that it's obvious that the British authorities were desperate to conceal something. They concluded, judging by the fact that they are still desperate to conceal it, common sense dictates that they deem this secret to be unsuitable for public consumption, even after 60 years. A detailed study of Hess's flight clearly indicates it was not just a sudden whim of an unstable individual. There's an evidence of foreknowledge in Germany. Hess prepared for the flight meticulously over a period of months, even having famed aircraft designer Willy Messerschmitt modify a twin-engine Messerschmitt 110. Hess also received special flight training from Messerschmitt's chief test pilot, as well as Hitler's personal pilot, Hans Bauer. On his flight, Hess carried the visiting cards of both Haushofer and his son Albrecht Haushofer, yet another indication of his intent as a peace mission, since the elder Haushofer had long been an advocate of maintaining friendly relations with Britain as a cornerstone of German politics. According to the French scholars Michael Bertrand and Jean Angelini, Haushofer passed along to Hess the names of the members of the Order of the Golden Dawn, an occult society in England, as well as names of supporters of a peace initiative, such as the Duke of Hamilton, the Duke of Bedford, and Sir Ivan Kirkpatrick. The Golden Dawn, most popularly connected to England's foremost occultist, drumroll please, Aleister Crowley the Beast, was an outgrowth of the Theosophical Society from which such Nazi mysticism was derived, and had close ties to the Thule Society. According to some theories, British intelligence manipulated Hess' belief in the occult to provoke his flight to England. Oddly enough, this scheme involved Crowley as well as British intelligence agent Ian Fleming, who would later write the popular James Bond novels. Via a Swiss astrologer known to Fleming, astrological advice was passed along to Hess via the Haushofers, and advocating a peace mission to England, wrote Lavenda. May 10, 1941 was selected as the appropriate date, since an unusual conjunction of 6 planets in Taurus would take place at that time. That's great. Both of these ministers were supportive of the peace initiative. I didn't read something probably. On orders of the government, Hamilton did not apply. However, one letter to Hamilton from the younger Haushofers was shown to British Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax and Air Minister Sir Archibald Sinclair. Both of these ministers were supportive of the peace initiative, which had to be kept officially secret and distant from Churchill. So while it's true that Hamilton showed the letter to his superiors, what is omitted is the fact that they kept quiet about it. It should be recalled that the Windsor family had always been sensitive about their German extraction. peace with their relatives would have been very desirable during the war years. In 2000, senior British government sources confirmed that private letters between the Queen Mother and Lord Halifax showed hostility toward Churchill and even a willingness to submit to Nazi occupation if the monarchy was preserved. Even Churchill, who was tightly connected to the empire builders of Britain, made it clear that the object of the war was to stop Germany, not the Nazis. You must understand that this war is not against Hitler or National Socialism, Churchill once said, but against the strength of the German people, which is to be smashed once and for all, regardless whether it's in the hands of Hitler or a Jesuit priest.
Whoops.
Yeah, I don't know what that meant, but it has some significance.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. In a letter to Lord Robert Boothby, Churchill explained that Germany's unforgivable crime before the Second World War was her attempt to extricate her economic power from the world's trading system and to create her own exchange mechanism which would deny world finance its opportunity to profit. It also must be recalled that in 1941, despite the successful Battle of Britain, England was economically strangled in near defeat. At the time Hitler seemed unstoppable, it was quite easy to envision a Nazi victory. The aristocracy, industrialists, bankers, and the royal family were eager for peace. Hess did not imagine a peace group completed Pinckney, nor was it invented by MI6, but its existence at such a high level as the Royals will explain why so much of the Hess affair was and continues to be hushed up.
Yeah.
As for Hitler, Germany was preparing to strike Russia, and he did not want a two-front war, the very situation that caused Germany's defeat in World War I. Hitler wanted England as an ally against communism. With England alone as an ally, one's back being covered could once begin the new German invasion of Russia, Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf. In other words, Hitler needed peace with Britain before undertaking an attack on Russia. Admiral N.G. Kuznetsov, who in 1941 was a Soviet Navy minister and a member of the Central Committee of the Soviet Communist Party, was quoted by named Surinov as stating in his post-war memoirs, "For me, there is one thing above all argument. J.V. Stalin not only did not exclude the possibility of war with Hitler's Germany, on the contrary, he considered such a war inevitable. J.V. Stalin made preparations for war, wide and varied preparations, beginning on dates which he himself had selected. Hitler upset his calculations." Okay. Hitler clearly indicated what he saw as the machinations undertaken to prevent any negotiated end to hostilities in 1941. In a speech to the Reichstag less than a week before Hess's arrival in Scotland, he declared, "All my endeavors to come to an understanding with Britain were wrecked by the determination of a small clique, which, whether from motives of hate or for the desire of material gain, rejected every German proposal for an understanding due to their resolve, which they never concealed to resort to war." Whatever happened. Pinckney, Prince, and Pryor even argued that CeeLo, or Sea Lion, the code name for the proposed German invasion of England, was a sham right from the beginning, an effort by Hitler to distract Stalin by feigning west when he actually planned to strike in the east. It was merely a cover for the mobilization of men and equipment needed for the invasion of the Soviet Union. One clue that this tactic was in play can be seen in the fact that Hitler, who was known for constantly interfering with the generals on the smallest of details, never showed any real interest in the plans for an invasion of England, according to the German military historian Egbert Kaiser. These authors, along with other historians, explain that Hitler's strange order to halt the German advance at Dunkirk allowed the British Army to escape the continent. Hitler wanted his future ally intact, and the prelude to such an alliance was Hess's peace initiative. On May 10, 1941, when Hess's ME-110 arrived over Scotland, he was to have landed in an airstrip near the Hamilton ancestral home, negotiate peace terms with the anti-Churchill faction, and then be flown to Sweden as the first leg of a return trip home. This faction was prepared to oust Churchill and agree to a ceasefire with Germany. This proposition may not be as absurd as it first sounds, Pinckney, Prince, and Pryor noted. The extravagant post-war mythologizing of Churchill has obscured the fact that he remained in a very insecure position politically for at least the first 2 years of his premiership, largely because it was well known that he did not to put it mildly, enjoy the support and confidence of the king. The notion of an internal coup against Churchill was even broached to President Roosevelt by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In a memorandum written only a week before the Hess flight, Hoover informed Roosevelt, "It was reported that the Duke of Windsor entered into an agreement which in substance was to the effect that if Germany was victorious in the war, Hermann Goering, through his control of the army, would overthrow Hitler and would thereafter install the Duke of Windsor as the King of England." Interestingly, Hess's flight brought him through the weakest section of the British coastal radar net, plus he overflew a Royal Air Force base twice without provoking any response, clues that orders had been given somewhere along the chain of command to facilitate his arrival. But he missed his landing spot, and low on fuel, finally was forced to bail out over a farm just south of Glasgow. Unarmed, his ankle broken from the jump, he was captured by a farmer with a pitchfork.
Right.
The Home Guard quickly became involved, and the whole secret operation was blown. Although Hess initially claimed to be a Luftwaffe pilot named Albert Horn, the subterfuge quickly failed. Horn kept asking to be taken to the Duke of Hamilton. The whole scheme was a massive embarrassment to all concerned. Everyone, including Hitler, had to disavow any connection with the plot. After all, for Hitler to admit that he was preparing to make peace with Britain would have tipped off Stalin that a German attack on Russia was imminent. British intelligence found itself conflicted over the Hess affair. MI6 was supportive of a negotiated peace with Germany, as it saw communist Russia as its real enemy, noted the three officers, whereas SOE, Special Operations Executive, was in favor of an alliance with Stalin against Hitler. As the Prime Minister's creation, SOE naturally was pro-Churchill. This rivalry led to strange occurrences along Hess's path to prison. He was moved to a variety of locations, some recollections of its whereabouts conflicting with others. There was every opportunity for pulling a switch before Hess was finally locked up in the Tower of London. Pinckney, Prince, and Pryor introduced yet another mystery, the death of George, the Duke of Kent, King George VI, youngest brother, and the first member of the royal family to die while on active military service since the 15th century. The Duke, like others in the royal family, was an admirer of the Nazis and was likely to have joined a peace group in a negotiated peace. He also served as an unofficial intelligence officer to his brother, the king. And in parentheses, and this is interesting, it may be noteworthy that in 1939, King George installed the Duke as the Grand Master of English Freemasonry at a ceremony at Olympia in West London. I think it's significant. Specifically, superficially, the Duke's death on August 25, 1942 was the result of a routine wartime accident. It was reported that the Sunderland flying boat in which he was a passenger crashed into a low hill called Eagles Rock in Caithness, Scotland. However, the Duke's plane clearly was in the process of ascending when it crashed, indicating it may have lifted off from nearby Loch Moor near Braymore Lodge, where accounts placed the captive Hess. Second, when statements from witnesses and the one survivor are compared with the other rosters, it becomes clear there was an unaccounted-for passenger on the craft. These factors, coupled with much more evidence, both hard and circumstantial, support the conjecture that the anti-Churchill peace group waited until mid-1942, a low ebb in Britain's war fortunes, before attempting to fly the Duke of Kent and Rudolf Hess to Sweden to announce a peace plan that could topple the Churchill government. Of course, this never happened due to the plane crash. Whether this was sabotage or an accident has not been clearly established. Well, knowing Churchill, who knows? If Hess died in the Duke's plane, it would have presented a thorny problem for Churchill. How to explain the mangled corpse of a man who was supposed to be their prized prisoner? Any investigation would have revealed the involvement of ranking members of British society. Here the story takes an even more bizarre twist. Evidence gathered for their book by Pinckney, Pryor, and Prince included Hess being reported as being seen at different locations at the same time, and inconsistency in official reports indicated that a duplicate Hess may have been prepared prior to the plane crash. We are convinced in the summer of 1942 there were two Hesses, one in Scotland and one at Mayndiff Court, Abergavenny, Wales, they wrote. The real Hess died in the crash, and the double lived to stand trial at Nuremberg and serve his sentence at Spandau. But even these astute authors acknowledge a huge problem with such a scenario. Even though it seems to fit the evidence perfectly, it has to be admitted that the mind skids on the thought that any man would allow himself to be tried and sentenced in Hess's name, not to mention continuing with the deception for the rest of a very long life in the harshest and most hopeless of conditions. The idea of a Rudolf Hess double is not new, and various theories have been advanced. One suggested that the lookalike was forced to play Hess out of fear for his family. Another was that Hess's double was a German, whoever the man was. German was his first language, and an ardent Nazi who was convinced it was necessary to the party that he maintain the subterfuge, especially since he might become the founder of a Fourth Reich. But the most provocative explanation comes from Pinckney, Prince, and Pryor, who learned that former CIA director, drumroll please, Allen Dulles, the founder of the Council of Foreign Relations
Big Al.
and High Commissioner of Germany after the war, had dispatched Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron to Nuremberg to examine Hess. Dulles expressed to Cameron his belief that Hess being held in Germany was an imposter, and that the real Hess had been secretly executed in orders from Churchill. Knowing of Hess's war wounds, Dulles wanted Cameron to especially note if there were any scars on the prisoner's chest. Interestingly enough, British military authorities in Nuremberg refused to allow such an examination. But the story grows stranger. Dr. Cameron was a Scot who pioneered brainwashing techniques before the end of the war at the Allen Memorial Institute at McGill University, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. He went on to become president of the American Psychiatric Association, as well as the first president of the World Psychiatric Association. He also became part of the CIA's notorious MK-Ultra mind control program. Various researchers have wondered if Dulles' choice of Dr. Cameron to study Hess might have shown from the knowledge of suspicion that the man posing as Hess had been brainwashed into actually believing he was a Nazi deputy Fuhrer. Mind control experimentation was much farther along, particularly in Europe, as shall be seen, than most people realize. Why else should Dulles have chosen a brainwashing expert to study Hess, when any competent physician could have checked for scar tissue? This subterfuge could account for Hess's eccentric behavior at the Nuremberg trials, during which he repeatedly claimed he had lost his memory, a convenience for someone who had not lived Hess's life. Once the peace plan went awry, all the usual methods to cover up came into play. Documents disappeared or were locked away from public scrutiny. Witnesses were coerced into silence, and multiple theories from authoritative sources were spread. One clue that a geopolitical game was being played out in the Hess affair is that the last person to dine with the Duke of Kent prior to the fatal crash that killed him, and perhaps the real Hess, was a foreign exile, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. The dinner represented an unusual gathering of the British royals at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, which, in addition to the Duke and Prince Bernhard, included King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. But it is Bernhard's presence that has caught the interest of researchers. Prince Bernhard originated meetings of the Bilderberg Group, a collection of world movers and shakers so secretive that they have no proper name. Bernhard was a former member of the Nazi SS and an employee of Germany's IG Farben in Paris. In 1937, he married Princess Juliana of the Netherlands and became a major shareholder and officer in Dutch Royal Shell, along with Britain's Lord Victor Rothschild. After the Germans invaded Holland, the royal couple moved to London. It was here after the war that Rothschild and the founder of the European Movement for Unity, Polish socialist Dr. Joseph Hiram Rettinger, encouraged Prince Bernhard to create the Bilderberg Group. The prince personally chaired the group until 1976, when he resigned following revelations that he accepted large payoffs from Lockheed to promote the sale of aircraft in Holland. It is impossible to know for certain whether Prince Bernhard sided with the British royal family in the peace initiative or was monitoring their activities for the pro-war Churchill clique, but is an indication of the machinations of the global elite. The peace initiative was stopped, and the globalist decision to stop National Socialism at all costs proceeded. There can be little doubt that the failure of Hess's peace mission to Britain on the eve of the attack of Russia created the unwanted two-front war that cost Hitler the victory. After the failure of Hess's ill-fated flight, his place in the Nazi hierarchy was taken by Martin Bormann, a man who will be discussed later. Some Nazi leaders, including Himmler and Bormann, became uncertain of victory and began laying plans for their survival. Well, there you go. That's the take on Hess, based on research of Jim Marrs.
Okay.
I thought you'd find it interesting.
It is interesting, and he's one guy, and I'm not arguing about anything, but
yeah,
things just they don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, you had said at the outset of the first segment that Hess went over there because Hitler was trying to make some kind of accord with Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Then why would Hess go over? To undermine that?
No. I mean, Hess was going over to try to pull it off, knowing that he would have to talk to the royals, because Churchill was opposed to. Churchill wanted a two-front war, and he did not want to make peace with the Nazis.
Right now, and again,
and
I mean,
Hess was going to appeal to the Duke of Hamilton, who was going to put him in league with the royals, and apparently King George VI and several other members of the royal family were in favor of making an alliance with the Nazis, or at least allowing the Nazis to win if they guaranteed that the monarchy would continue.
All right, I'm not saying you're defending this point of view, and you might be, and that's okay. But
no, I'm not. I'm just.
Oh no, but I mean, this is why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, my feeling is by World War I, the monarchs had been reduced to nothing. Mm-hmm. You just sit there and be nice, and we'll get back to you later. Mm-hmm. Seriously, I mean, even going back to that whole event with the seeking of Lusitania, the nobility wasn't on the inside of that. That was all orchestrated by what really runs England. Mm-hmm. And yes, it was true in Simpson's book, The Lusitania. The king does ask a U.S. emissary, I can't remember who it was, or maybe it was even, I don't know, Churchill, whatever. He says, what do you think will happen when the Lusitania is sunk? And they knew damn well what was going to happen, that the United States would come flying in, and that was the point. Although it did take years, there's no two ways about it. But my point is, the monarchs weren't calling the shots for God knows how long. So I can't imagine how they would factor into anything.
Well, there's an element. It's not just the monarchy itself, but there's a large element of the British aristocracy who really liked the idea of fascism, who were really in favor of National Socialism, in favor of the Nazis. And, there was a power struggle there, but within the upper class, within the elite. Here's a quote that kind of amplifies what we're saying here. This is also from The Rise of the Fourth Reich. Author Joseph P. Farrell stated, Joseph P. Farrell's written quite a few books about the Nazis, and especially about UFO technology, etc., and has studied them quite thoroughly. Said author Joseph P. Farrell stated that the covert connections of Eckhart and future Deputy Fuhrer Martin Bormann support the idea that Hitler was deliberately manipulated and placed into power, and secretly manipulated behind the scenes by more powerful forces than even he wielded, and when he had served his purpose, was deliberately sabotaged and cast aside.
I'm just thinking this out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not driving anything home, or I don't want to win any point.
But I really don't know what the story was, but we know that the official story about Hess just didn't add up.
No, it didn't. And I'll tell you, to me, the royals were absolutely, or the aristocracy, they were, as far as I'm concerned, they're completely effete. Don't mean a thing. Nice window dressing, great, okay. But, here's the other thing I'm wondering about, too. It's like, yeah, they're first cousins, but they couldn't manage not to go fight each other in the First World War. And if you hadn't had enough, let's do it again. And Germany would be crazy to fight a two-front war, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
But you see, again, Hitler's invasion of Russia occurred later in the war, did it not? Are we looking at 44?
It occurred in 1941.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, 1941. I believe summer of 1941, June 1941.
Well, they started, but they wound up getting starved by the war. Remember, by the cold.
Yeah. What happened is that they got stopped twice in their major thrust in there. They were stopped when they tried to get to Moscow. The winter slowed them down greatly and allowed the Russians to make a counterattack. And they also got caught by the cold in 1942 at Stalingrad. And they just didn't seem to learn any lessons as far as outrun their supply lines, and the winter caught them just like Napoleon.
But But both of those, well, I mean, Napoleon I can give some, I guess, further credit to. I mean, Hitler, whatever. But, I mean, those are both, I mean, that's like War 101. Mm-hmm. You don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're going to attribute it to hubris? I mean, come on, man. They had to know that wasn't going to work. And what I'm saying is I believe that both of them dashed their armies because of the script. With Napoleon, he did what he was supposed to do, and that was no further. Now go send him over to Russia. Yeah, great.
You know, we were talking about one of your, I believe Bob Rossi was a friend of yours, right?
Yeah, he was. I sat under him.
Was he your pastor?
Yes,
yeah.
He was.
I know that Rossi has written...
Rosio.
Rosio, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I believe he wrote a book about Hitler and in
yes,
Second World War and the influence of the occult and Satanism on that. And in it, if I remember correctly, I just have to paraphrase it, he was saying that Hitler was never happy with the number of losses that the Germans suffered. In other words, he was trying to sacrifice, make a blood sacrifice. You know, and that his idea was to really basically to destroy Germany in the end, and that's the way it worked out.
Yeah. You know, and Bob was an insatiable historian, very nice guy.
Yeah.
And he was the principal of Jesuit Christian Academy. I was a teacher there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a great work over there, and they're still going now. His son is taking over, Todd. But it's funny because after I left, he would send me books.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in '94. I remember it distinctly. It was the spring of '94 when I started reading the one, and it never dawned. Well, I mean, this is the way it is. It never dawned on me of Satan's role in warfare.
Oh yeah.
And now, if that's the case with me, 13 years under the blood, how many other people are walking around not understanding that Satan's running this whole show? They act as if he's not even involved.
Oh yeah.
That we're actually dealing with flesh and blood, which, of course, as you well know. I mean, there's an adjuration in the New Testament. Where is it? Is it that famous passage? Is it in one of Paul's epistles? Excuse me. That we wrestle not with flesh and blood, with principalities of darkness.
Oh gosh, I should know that. That's
all right.
Ephesians, I believe.
All right, and the thing is, I mean, doesn't that hit people right between the eyes? And yet they still think that all this stuff we see on the news-carried political landscape is for real. And in a way, I understand it is, but there's somebody behind it. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to what I was saying about that Keith Green song about Satan. Nobody believes in me anymore, and he's laughing his tail off. And he should.
Yeah.
Because
the whole point behind both the First and Second World Wars was to advance the agenda of world government. And the Third World War will be the final icing on the cake, which will bring in world government. Because it's going to be so horrible and so much blood and death and so much destruction that people will yell for, they're going to be begging for a world government to stop this type of war, because it would result in annihilation. And it's not by chance that the atomic bomb was developed at the end of the Second World War. This is the weapon that had always been hoped for, a weapon of such massive destruction that it gave the side that had it, a tremendous advantage.
Yeah,
not only that, I mean, and those little atomic bombs that they dropped back then are nothing compared to the weaponry they have now, with hydrogen bombs and huge megaton bombs. I mean, really within the first day of a Third World War, if it became a global nuclear war, I mean, billions could die.
But but now we go back to the point, and I know I'm very driven by this, but I can't see any way around it. And that is, but the wars are scripted.
Yeah.
And they allow so much decimation and no more. Now, I'm not so sure what's going to happen the third time around, but when I look at Hitler and the decisions he made, we look at two countries, yes, that we call first cousins, and they can't seem not to kick each other in the ass. And there's something not right about this whole scenario. Mm-hmm. Churchill, the Royals do not, as far as I'm concerned, the Royals have not factored into the real geopolitical landscape for I don't know, maybe 2 centuries. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, is it any coincidence that the Rothschilds should grab hold of the Bank of England in what, about the mid-1700s?
Mm.
All right, there you go. Any questions? Okay, so I mean, there you go. I mean,
I think Churchill's explanation to Lord Boothby, he was very interesting. Germany's unforgivable crime before the Second World War was her attempt to extricate her economic power from the world's trading system and to create her own exchange mechanism, which would deny world finance its opportunity to profit. In other words, they had gone against what the
World Bank,
elite wanted, what the New World Order wanted, and that's where they were going to get their comeuppance.
All right, now, he said that about Germany's involvement in what caused World War II.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now, consider World War I. The fear was, okay, look, Germany's an economic power. Mm-hmm. They have a limited coastline, which we all forget about, and they want to go out and make hay. We can't let this happen. Mm-hmm. Now that's what probably most historical accounts will give you, no matter, get outside the history textbooks. Now think about something else, though, and I won't have to try to sell this to you because, you get it. I had emailed Phelps about this as well. And one of the things that took place also is that Germany solidified, finally pulled in its nation states, and started to become some kind of national entity. Mm-hmm. Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
All the little nation states and stuff, okay, we got it all together now.
I think it was in the 1870s that they really finally united.
And I mean, I am bad about this, so please forgive me. Like you had said before, I'm not deep in this, but you got Bismarck involved in this, mm-hmm. and one of the Kaisers. Mm-hmm. And it was probably Protestant oriented. Mm-hmm. And they wanted now to break away from the European community. I don't want to be held to that, but I think that's pretty much approximates what I understand.
Well, part of the problem that Germans had was that the dominant state in the new Germany, once it united, the dominant state was Prussia. Prussia was mm-hmm. itself was dominated by the Junkers, which were the aristocrats. They were somewhat militaristic, but Prussia was a Protestant state, and
yes.
Germany had enacted laws that the Roman Catholic Church did not like, such
That's
as
right.
they would not allow the Roman Catholic Church to continue its education facilities, and this created a lot of problems. They really tried to curb the power of the Roman Catholic Church in Germany, and of course, Bavaria was almost exclusively Roman Catholic, so there was always a conflict there. And then when Hitler made his push for power, it all started in Bavaria.
All right. So our point here is, if we look at it through the prism of the Holy Roman Empire wishing to eventually, however long it took, mm-hmm. reemerge.
Right.
One of the things that it had to do with Germany's, and this is the beginning of the 20th century, mm-hmm. Newfound, shall we say, solidified nationalism.
Right.
This was not what they wanted. I don't think I read this to you. Would you give me a second?
Sure.
This is from Phelps. And I mean, as much as we are at odds at times with what Eric does, I mean, he's a very good historian.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said Bismarck's Protestant Second Reich was hated by Rome. It had conquered Catholic Austria, 1866, and Catholic France, 1871. Thus, we have the attempted assassination of both the Protestant Kaiser Wilhelm I and Bismarck, 2 attempts on Bismarck. They escaped since they had expelled the Jesuit order in 1872 after the order had sought to use France to destroy Protestant Prussia in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71. France lost, Napoleon III fled to Queen Victoria's Great Britain, and from there the order plotted the overthrow of the Protestant Second Reich via the British Crown. Germany being the most powerful and wealthiest nation in Europe, a war was to be incited by the 2 greatest nations born out of the Protestant Reformation, as its 400-year anniversary was arriving in 1917, and a huge celebration was planned. I'm going to send this to you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not fair to read that, and for you to deal with it on a cold read.
I really don't have any problem with what he's saying.
I don't either. I mean,
it sounds like it's historically correct.
I mean, to me, Germany could never have sat well, in a sense, with the Romanists because, well, who came out with the idea to print the Bible in something that everybody could read? And also with Luther. I mean, I'm not saying Luther was lily white, not at all. That's fine. Okay, I get it. But still in all, it was an antagonization toward Romanism. And it was Germany. I mean, Germany has had several very strong Catholic states. It was not expressly a Protestant nation. But still.
No, it's about 50-50, actually, I believe.
I mean, I live down here in Florida. It's a hoot. I mean, I live next to the somewhat towns of not only St. Leo, but St. Joseph, San Antonio, and it was a direct migration from the United States up in Minnesota of a Catholic enclave up there, which you laugh about because usually you think about it as being all squareheads and German Protestants, of which I am one. Ja, ouf da.
For sure.
Sure. Verne.
Whisker do. I don't know.
All I know is
I don't know what that is.
Well, all I know is my our landlord at one time, Oscar Peterson, would come looking for my father around at Christmas. He goes, "I got the glug. I made the glug." All I know is whatever that potion was, my father came back happier than I had ever seen him. Yes, Hank Hansen and Oscar. Yes, there you go. So yeah, I mean, there is other. Here's what's so fascinating about it, and I don't mean to sell anybody on everything. But I know that there is a story that they put up for sale for general consumption, and then you got Jim, and Jim does good work. But I still think, there's something else other than that, and Jim won't touch it. In fact, Jim came on once. Do you remember when we had him on with Adam Gorightly?
Yeah, kind of vaguely.
Yeah, well, great. Adam was fooling around with his little sound effects on his end.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you remember that scene? And I'm like, Jim, hello, Jim. And I'm like, oh, Christmas. And poor David from Virginia, Prometheus, was like trying to get Morris to come back on.
Yeah.
And I said to Jim, I go, look, I love Adam. No problem whatsoever. I go, look, Jim, I'd like to talk to you about something else. And I think it was Prometheus who said that he's kind of hip also to the Jesuits or whatever. I wrote Jim twice. He never answered. Nope, gone. Couldn't care less. Never heard from him again. And I don't know what that was all about, but, anyway.
I would really like to hear, him expound upon this book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, and in particular about Hess and Hitler's, motivations, and about this thing about Churchill too, because that other statement. But let's see, Churchill once stated, "You must understand this war is not against Hitler or National Socialism, but against the strength of the German people, which is to be smashed once and for all, regardless whether it is in the hands of Hitler or a Jesuit priest." That is a very interesting line there. There's a lot that one could surmise there.
Do you have where that quote came from? Don't look for it now, but I know you got a footnote somewhere. Send me the work that it comes from, if you won't mind.
If I can find it.
That's okay.
I don't see a note there for a footnote, but I'll look.
That's even interesting in itself.
Yeah, that's what Morris put in there. It said Churchill once stated.
But it's interesting because Cecil Rhodes formed his round table under an oath that would approximate the Jesuit oath.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have to laugh. I'm dealing with a book here. Hold on a second.
It's the secret societies over and over again, and
not so secret, by the way. But
yeah.
Yes, you're right. Yeah,
over and over again. They're manipulating.
I have a book.
And that thing about the Duke of Windsor. Not Duke of Windsor. What was it? George VI's youngest brother. Becoming the head of Freemasonry. That was interesting too. He appoints him head of Freemasonry.
And that's what I'm saying. What is the story all about? What was the world? I mean, this is like a duh question, I know, for most people, but no, you know what I mean. What was World War II really about? Will somebody tell me about this? Because you know what's interesting is World War I.
It was to bring about the United Nations, as I see it.
Yes.
That's really all it was. It was to kill off a certain amount of the population. It was to set up the United Nations, and it was also to force the Jews into Israel so that they could enforce the final solution, which is what the dark powers want. And I think that's coming about within the next few years. I give it 15, 20 years. I think we'll see the Third World War. I could be totally wrong on the timeline. That's just what I'm thinking. It would take about that much time.
I think we don't err when we think a little longer. Of course, all the patriots take hold of this to say that something that doesn't happen as soon as they wish it to be or think it should be means that we got them on the run. But we understand that. Okay, it's like, no, you don't really know.
Got them on the run, yeah.
No, they've been at this for a long time. They're not in a hurry. Generationally, all those who have passed away believe that they're going to be in some kind of heaven for all that they've done. Now, of course, all of them understand that they're burning in hell, but that's okay. But still in all, there is a long, I mean, they're good at this. They've been at it for centuries, and they're not in a big hurry. Whatever the point of time is, whatever that means, fine. I mean, people don't believe that, and you can make a case for that, and I understand it. I just don't think that they make a lot of mistakes. It's just things don't happen the way the people who understand what's going on here want it to happen. They're kind of like in a rush to get it going, and I understand that too. It's just not the way it goes.
We were talking about the Pike-Mazzini letter, and I really don't believe the Pike-Mazzini letter is real, but, and I'm not, I know there was a guy who says he saw it and all that, but I don't believe it was real. But the strange part about it is whoever wrote it really did understand the script.
Okay, well, I tell you what.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, but,
It's like whoever wrote it really did understand the script, and yes, if it was written by Pike, you bet he understood the script.
But let's kick this.
But it's a series of 3 world wars to bring about world government, which is, Satan's kingdom on earth. He wishes, to have a world government so that he can be at its head and be worshipped as a god.
What I wanted to say to you was, and I'm looking through my notes, as you can hear me leafing through this pad, this deserves to be at least spoken about, and it goes back to what you had mentioned before when you talked about the protocols. Mm-hmm. Yes, William Still said he saw the letter in the London Museum. Mm-hmm. That's as good as it gets.
I think I would not want to say the man's a liar, but I think he may be mistaken, or he may have heard this from somebody and said, he exaggerated and said he saw it. I don't know.
Well, I have two.
It doesn't even matter to me. I really don't care. But the point is, that the verbiage in there is exactly the scenario which seems to be working out, which seems to be the script.
All right.
Which is 3 world wars.
And I agree with you, but I would also take this Pike-Mazzini letter, and like I said, I have 2 audios with Bill. I probably should put him back up and listen to him, because when he says it, if he does say it on mic, and it's been so long, in fairness, I'd have to see if it was on the air or off the air. But here's what it brings us to. Take the Pike-Mazzini letter, take the protocols, take the Communist Manifesto, or the Manifesto of the Communist Party, and then take the report from Iron Mountain. Every single one of those epistles / missives, whatever, has been eventually trashed as spurious. Or at least not necessarily. All right, here's where I'm going with this. Who the heck wrote the protocols? You think that if the Jews are the bad guys, would they write a blueprint and put it out there? I think not.
I think the protocols are probably the work of Rosicrucians, / Jesuits.
Oh, I was going to say, or our buddies.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's who it was, and it was definitely there to create hatred toward the Jews, but it also, in effect, tells what they're doing. That's the funny part. They're telling exactly what they're doing, and that's why people buy into it.
That's right. Well,
and it's perfect. You blame all of this on the people that you want to destroy, and yet in effect, you are telling the truth, so it makes it seem like they really are doing these things.
And I would just reverse the order and say they are telling you exactly what's going to happen, and then they pin the tail on the donkey. Okay, it's their fault.
Yeah.
And the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, give me a break. No. I mean, no. He and Engels and no. That and also you're trying to track down, if you haven't, the whole deal with Mein Kampf. Even that wasn't written.
Oh yeah, Mein Kampf. There were several people who wrote Mein Kampf. One of those people was a Jesuit priest, Father Bernhard Stampfel. I mean, I've gotten that from several sources.
Yeah.
Which say that he was definitely involved, edited it, and put some of the material in there. Also, as you read here, as I read here today, Rudolf Hess had a lot to do with it. Haushofer said that, and Haushofer put material in there. He was the guy who was the geopolitician who talked about the Earth Island, and that's why it was so important to get the Muslims involved. In fascist / Nazi theory now, the idea is to have the people of the third world to help bring about this new world order that they have been striving for so long.
And interestingly,
and then once they've got it, in their control, they'll wipe them out.
That's exactly right. So what we're saying is all these documents, and even the report at Iron Mountain, once it actually raised a greater stir than I think it was fathomed to have happened. It was like, oh no, it's nothing. No, it is something.
Have you got a couple of minutes so I could look for something? It won't take me long. I know exactly where it is, and I could read you something from that is pertinent to what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about Madame Blavatsky again, and about the influence of the Rosicrucians. Theosophy was born in 1875, a key time of political upheaval throughout Europe as Russia was moving towards revolution, following the example set by America and France. The Theosophy movement was an attempt to occultize the newly emerging industrial and merchant class and provide a spiritual antidote to Marxism straight from the Rosicrucian philosophy that previously had been for hand-picked initiates only. The Grail aristocratic families of the Holy Roman Empire were planning to reunify the old territories and needed the control and support of the managing classes. It is no coincidence that their plan to infiltrate Freemasonry and seize absolute control of the Western world's social, political, and economic institutions, as outlined in the Protocols of Sion, appear simultaneously with the Synarchy ideology, and that's the ideology of secret societies, and the creation of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement. As the protocols stress, our philosophers will discuss all the shortcomings of the various beliefs of the manipulated, but no one will ever bring under discussion our faith from its true point of view, since this will be fully learned by none save ours, will never betray his secrets. At the turn of the 20th century, this agenda was again outlined in the Priory of Zion's Heron de Val d'Or that described a theocracy wherein nations will be no more than provinces, their leaders but proconsuls in the service of a world occult government consisting of an elite. This regime of the great king will be a double hegemony of the papacy and the empire of the Vatican and of the Habsburgs. This ambitious scheme was thwarted with the assassination of Habsburg heir Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Theosophy's teachings about enlightened mystics guiding human evolution toward the creation of a higher super race and pseudo-theories about the ancient Aryan civilization of Atlantis promoted dangerous racial theories that formed the core of Austrian and German anti-Semitism. From an aristocratic background, Helena Blavatsky, the widow of Russian Army General Count Blavatsky, designed elaborate genetic family trees that clearly illustrated the superiority of the Aryan people over the other races. These strange beliefs were heralded by middle-class occultists throughout Germany and Austria-Hungary and merged with their extreme right-wing nationalist politics. Hence, complete reunification of the Holy Roman Empire, effectively abolished by Napoleon in 1806, became a priority not only of the ruling aristocracies but also of the merchant middle classes. The ensuing horrors of World War I was an attempt to take France from the democratic republicans by a vengeful aristocracy who had seen their brethren murdered by the French Revolution. The new middle-class occultists such as Guido von List and his Armanen Order, Baron von Sabbatendorf and his Thule Society, and Lanz von Liebenfels and the Order of the New Templars referred to the First World War as a holy war, revealing the quasi-religious and philosophical motives of their hidden masters. It has been documented that Nazi Party leaders Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Rudolf Hess, and Hermann Göring were all members of these occult secret societies. The protocols of the learned elders of Zion and the Haran de Val d'Or are proof that a conspiracy of epic proportions was at play behind the broader political scene. The end of the First World War resulted in Kaiser Wilhelm I being banished to Belgium and the removal of the Habsburgs from the throne of the Second Empire. The global hegemony of great king and pope was delayed. The Habsburgs' reluctant abdication was upon the insistence of the Allied nations and their Treaty of Saint-Germain. Incidentally, the Order of Saint-Germain is the French royal Stuart equivalent of the Habsburgs' Order of Sion, each laying claim to genetic superiority and kingship of Jerusalem. Such is the secret subtext of European war and politics. The magically relevant regions of Alsace and Lorraine were promptly returned to the Republic of France through the Treaty of Versailles, which not so much infuriated young Hitler as his aristocratic hidden masters behind the curtain. While their agenda had brutally backfired, the great White Brotherhood were by no means beaten, and a simple reversal of the truth, a common propaganda technique, would lead them ever closer to their goal and introduce the world to perhaps their greatest spin doctor. In his popular book, Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler conveniently used the protocols of the Elders of Zion to deceptively prove that a global conspiracy was afoot, but led by the League of Jewish Rabbis. This stirred massive anti-Semitism that ultimately justified the Holocaust of the German people. Earlier in 1919, the newly formed Thule Society had distributed copies of the controversial protocol to troops of the White Russian Army loyal to the Tsar in an attempt to blame the Jews for the ensuing revolution. This led to the massacre of 60,000 Jews over 2 years and was perhaps the beginning of the Jewish Holocaust. The Rosicrucian Protocols document is still used by neo-Nazi groups throughout the world to stir anti-Semitism and hate. Even today, Republican David Duke promotes these same anti-Semitic theories on his popular website and continues to blame the Russian Revolution on the Jewish people, regardless of the historical oppression of the Russian people that motivated this conflict. The fact that Jerusalem's Mount Zion is prophesied, according to St. John's Revelation, as the place of the second coming of Christ, is conveniently ignored by these right-wing groups, as it is a fact that the premier secret organization dedicated to the second coming, albeit through a complex and conflicted view of genetic bloodlines and reactionary socio-political models, is a priori of Zion. Although thought by many academics to be a creation of Russian Tsar Nicholas II's secret police, to those aware of occult references, the protocols of Zion clearly show the hand of the Grail/Dragon sovereignty. It is likely the Tsarists altered the text to include traditional Jewish terminology that otherwise had no place in what is obviously a Rosicrucian agenda with Jesuit undertones.
Yeah, I think they're giving the Rosicrucians more credit than they deserve, because the good old SOJ is always around. But the point's well taken, and and that's okay. I mean, where did that come from?
This is Alex Constantine.
Okay. All right. I have no problem with that. I just think that they still underplay.
Well, there's a lot more to it.
Okay.
I'd like to read the rest of it at some point, but probably not today. It's pretty long.
No, we've given them more than can handle.
Yeah. Oh, man.
But
it's been fun.
But honestly, sometimes I brusque at using words like how fascinating, how interesting this is, because it really did entail the murder of millions.
Yeah.
And it just sounds bad. But
yeah.
the machinations that have been going on with the certain levels and filters that we've gotten history through, which most of them are obviously there for a reason to deflect blame or focus on the real perps and on the usual suspects. But if we can tie it up, and as it applies to Nazi Germany in World War II, I find it interesting. Why would Hess go over there if Hitler was wanting an accord with Britain. And I understand the royalty element and that there's a couple of factions going on. I can't buy into that. I believe that if he's going over, it's like, this thing is crazy. But that's seen, that's seen through my prism. And I kind of.
It's one of those that we'll never know for sure. There's only, very limited number of people who knew what was actually happening. And and like the authors were saying, that they know that the official story can't be the truth because there's so much of a cover-up going on and so much information is being repressed.
Yes.
So we know that something went wrong there, and that it's all based upon the idea of Hess wanting to get a rapprochement going, or going over to talk to the British about keeping it from being a two-front war.
Yeah, I'm
But I think the whole point is that Churchill wanted it to be a two-front war and wanted Germany to get crushed for whatever reason. I mean,
yeah.
they really did need Germany to go in and expand the war. That's what was necessary. And the war had to go on for several years. They didn't want the war to be short. They wanted the war to go on for several years because they wanted to kill more people. I forget how many millions of people were killed in Russia. I mean, not soldiers necessarily, although there were several million soldiers killed, but there were millions of Russian people. Just civilian people were killed. I think it's in tens of millions.
A lot of stuff got done. Maybe they would call it nowadays ethnic purification. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff got done under the guise of World War II. What Stalin perpetrated on his people, to me, is like absolutely unbelievable. But that's how it went. I mean, you had a bunch of really repugnant leaders, and that is Churchill,
right.
I'm sorry, Roosevelt, and Stalin, and of course Hitler was in a class unto himself. Mm-hmm. But when they try to kill him, which the movie Valkyrie tries to approximate.
Well, I think when it became obvious, like we've talked about this before, I think it became obvious to the loyal German, two things became obvious. One was this genocide campaign, which many of them did not agree with. They saw that as,
dishonorable. Dishonorable,
yeah.
Yes.
They understood warfare against other men in combat. They understood what communism was all about. They didn't want that to come to Germany, and they wanted to fight the Russians for that reason. They also, understood the concept that they could get all these resources from Russia. But what they didn't understand was the SS going in behind them and just slaughtering the Jews. And a lot of them were shocked at that. They didn't see a point in it.
No, they were men of honor, not of hate.
Yeah.
And they were soldiers. They weren't, vigilantes.
Yeah.
I got to believe also. I mean, when they spanked Rommel, I mean, let's see who's being successful and let's denigrate them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I mean, I just caught the end of The Longest Day. You remember that movie from '62?
Yeah.
Which was the longest movie.
Yeah.
And
John Wayne. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think I'll go over there. Okay, John. Couldn't be in the war because you had bad knees, but you're still climbing over that berm, aren't you, buddy? That's okay. Yeah, and right. It was great. But the idea, about the Führer's asleep, don't give me that crap. Don't give me that crap. Oh, we're getting invaded, Führer. You think you might want to call this 2:15 nap a little bit shorter? No. That stuff is just, it doesn't make sense. But even if that were the case, and if that was being sold to the Germans, then the officers had to know this thing was a rigged deal. Yeah. We're not supposed to win this.
Yeah, and at that point, it's like, well, this is the SOB that got us into this.
There you go.
Well, let's get rid of him and see if we can't make peace, before the Russians, move all the way in here.
Yeah, and Germany and Russia signed a non-aggression pact in the mid-'30s, did they not?
Yeah, in 1939 they signed the non-aggression pact.
Yeah,
which gave Russia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and supposedly Finland, but they got into a real problem when they tried to take Finland because the Finns said, "I don't think so, Scooter. We're going to fight back."
Yeah, we like the
They
Finns.
killed thousands of Russians. they inflicted about 10-1 losses on the Russians because of their tactics.
And
but they didn't have anybody from the outside world to help them, and they didn't have an air force.
There you go.
That killed them.
Yeah, I mean, just on that alone, we'll allow them in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Other than that, they don't belong. But they got great hockey players, though. Damn. Damn. All right.
The Finns proved themselves to be very tough. I mean, they give the Russians all they could handle. If they had been a larger nation with a larger population and had an air force, they might have been able to push them all the way back.
Well, that was a strange. Here you go. I mean, the world has seen World War II. You think everybody might want to just chill out and just rest for a while? No, we got Russia and Finland getting into a slap fight in around 49, and then you got us involved in Korea. Like, please tell us what that was about. And that is not to denigrate the veterans or anything, but you look at some of these things and it's like, why did this happen? And I've had the Dumases on, as you might remember, who chronicled the loss of one of their 3 brothers, I believe, that were in Korea and thought to be a POW in China. You got to. I mean, I don't know if you remember that at all, Larry, but that was some kind of really riveting account of a brother looking for his missing brother in Korea. And going to John Kerry and what's the other idiot, McCain?
Yeah.
And they literally turned their backs on him in Congress. Unfreaking believable. And I know we're going, wide on this, but the thing is, what we're being portrayed, how a war is being portrayed to us, is not necessarily the reality. And World War II, I think, on a lot of counts, just stinks to high heaven.
Yeah.
As far as what the real deal was. And so, in sum, what I'm wondering is, if Hess thought this whole thing was... See, I was always in the impression that Hess said, like, this is nuts, I got to go over there and talk peace to him. But you're saying there were factions over there and that he, yes, indeed, was going to try to talk sense to one of them. Is that correct?
Yeah. Basically, he thought that maybe the Duke of Hamilton, who was a leader, amongst the aristocracy there, he thought that maybe he and his group could push Churchill out of office and put somebody in there who would make peace. And he pointed out that the royals actually did not want to fight Germany because that's basically fighting their own kinfolks, and that they were against Churchill, and they wanted to side with Germany against Russia. And MI6 MI6 wanted to side. They were not with Churchill in this, which is unusual, but MI6 wanted to go with Germany. So I think he had a faction there, a powerful faction, but in the end, I think Churchill proved to be more devious and more powerful than those people. But that's what he says.
Okay.
It could be it could be what you were saying. Hess just got fed up and said, "This is enough. This is crazy. We're going to have a 2-front war here. This doesn't make sense."
But, the royals that were in place then, whether it was they necessarily or their line, were in place when World War I started. And that was, again, against the German people for no obvious reason. Mm-hmm. And that's when they created the whole situation with the Lusitania, which clearly was documented that Wilson knew and Churchill knew that they sent the Lusitania over and they took away the cover and they let that ship get sunk.
Well, it's like Churchill's making this, obviously it's all about higher powers manipulating them, to do certain things. And certain nations would get out of line or were not following the game plan, and they would, get punished for it, as I see it.
Yeah.
Kind of get set up to be attacked or, to be brought down. And I think Hitler really, in the long run, he did nothing but destroy Germany. He brought about Germany's destruction through his idiotic military moves. The whole thing with Stalingrad, I mean, they could have retreated from Stalingrad, and he could have saved the cream of the German army, but he didn't.
Exactly.
He made them stand and fight. They had no ammunition. They had no fuel. They had no food. They were freezing to death. and literally thousands of them just froze to death. And when they had nothing to fight with, they had no ammunition. What are you going to stand there with a bayonet?
Well, but
it was idiotic. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Hitler had been a soldier. He knew that from time to time you had to make strategic retreats. It just didn't make sense, to get yourself killed for no good purpose.
But you see, you hit it right on the head. It only can make sense if it's a rigged deal, if it's a thrown fight.
Right. Exactly.
And that's why I look at Hitler as being exactly what he's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. He raised them all up. He got them all worked into a lather, and he sent them out upon the rocks of destruction. Not after they got certain things done, but for him to make those mistakes. Listen, a fourth grader could have done that.
Yeah. And the really funny part is, whenever his master was through with him, he got humiliated and wound up senile at 56 and scrambling around like a rat in his bunker, making pronouncements and calling on army groups that no longer existed to go fight the Russians.
Well, he did have Eva, though.
Yeah.
He was getting something done there.
What
was she thinking?
Never quite understood that relationship.
Here, Adolf, put this bag over your head. You coyote ugly. Do you know? Did I ever tell you?
That's one guy that didn't get there on his looks.
God, he passed gas more than I did. Mr. Flatulence.
Yeah.
He must have been a real hoot to be around. I didn't even mean it. I'm sorry I said that. Hoot. Yeah, I get it. Toot. Whatever. But seriously, I mean, there's so much there. I mean, that is an awful rich place, and we try to get through the bullshit, to get to this stuff, and we're seeing it really being played out now, right before our very eyes. And I think the reason why we did this series, and I'm going to let you chime in on that, because, you were very much the principal person in this. It's because you can sell exactly what happened in Nazi Germany here, and we think it can happen.
Oh yeah, and it's been here all along, and like we pointed out in this series, the money behind putting Hitler into power, a huge amount of it came from the United States, and in particular from the Bush family and the Harriman family, and other notables. And you had people like the Hearst newspaper chain, supported Hitler and Mussolini in their early days. There's a huge amount of documentation showing the collusion of the American upper class aristocracy. Wall Street put Hitler and the Nazi Party into the position they got into, along with money from Britain too, and the City of London.
Yeah. The cast of good guys and bad guys, I don't really think is as clear as mainstream news and historical textbooks would make us believe. And I would just ask people to look for themselves. I mean, again, Sutton does that work. He did Wall Street and what was it? Wall Street and Hitler.
Yeah, Hitler. Let's see, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler.
Okay. And he has several good books. That book in particular is online if folks want to read it.
Yeah.
But we arm our enemies before we fight them because it's good business for everybody except those who lose their lives.
Right. And war's always been known as a big business stimulant. I mean, and that's the one thing that in this country the elite really do not want to put money into social spending. They want to put money into defense spending because that's where they make money, with their industry. I mean, you can't make money on
peace.
Yeah, on peace. Yeah, peace. That sucks. I mean, let's have war. We can build a lot of planes and bombs and guns.
Peace and health, good for people, bad for government and elites.
That's right.
And that's it. I'm sorry. That's it.
Right. We don't want to put money into research, for. We don't want to put money into education. We don't want to put money in any kind of social spending because we really can't make a lot of money off that.
No, we need death, destruction, and reconstruction.
Death, destruction is good for business.
Yes, it is. Now, I assume against my better wishes and judgment, you're coming back.
Oh yeah, well, I'm coming back.
Okay.
And this time, you know what? Next time, let's discuss that the Old Testament, and the Arab Confederation. I'll get something. I felt so
No.
dumb sitting there going, "Gosh, I know this stuff, but I can't remember the quotes."
Yeah, Larry, you weren't dumb,
parts
but
of the Bible, and I was just like stumbling there. But hey, I'll get it next time.
I just hit myself. No, you weren't dumb. It's okay. No, really. And I was just searching out there too. No, don't ever think you know on something like that. You got to be. In fact, the nicest thing about it is the people who come on the show, if they can't speak to it, they don't. They admit it. They don't blow smoke, and that's cool. But they're. No, but I mean, you know, if that's an interest of yours, and that's piqued it, yeah, by all means, come on. I mean, let's do that because I just think a lot of people.
You know, there's so many things that we can talk about in regards to the Nazis and to their influence in American life. One thing we haven't covered, and I don't know if you even want to or not, but I'd like to talk about. I'm going to try to prepare something to talk about Nazi technology, and especially Nazi technology as it relates to UFOs.
Well, you know, Andy was just on Colvin.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem about that whatsoever. In fact, maybe down the road somewhere, maybe you both should come on. I don't know, but I mean, it'd be nice.
That might be fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure Andy knows a lot more about that particular subject than I do, but I've been trying to read up on it, and it's just fascinating.
I think the cross section of what you've both done adds to a very larger sum. And that might be a good topic for a show that crosses a couple of lines.
I enjoy listening to Andy. The thing I like about him too is he's another guy who he just tells it as he sees it. You know, there's no particular agenda there. It's just this is what I know and this is what I've seen, and here's the results of my research.
And I said this to him as time's gone on now, and I feel like we've been together for like 700 years. But Colvin and Gorightly, they have a self-deprecating sense of humor. They have a little tongue stuck inside their cheek to a certain degree, but they're serious about what they do. And one of the things I said to Adam, I said it to Adam a couple of times, but when Andy was just on, I'm like, we did things and we didn't, we kind of were cavalier about it. But if you take a look back through all the shows, there is definitely some very formative images that emerge that tell us a lot about the way we are.
Right.
And Adam portrays himself as the crackpot historian, and that's okay. We can deal with that. But I'll tell you what, I mean, there's a lot of punch in the crackpot part of the history.
I'll tell you what, there are two areas of study or issues or whatever you want to call it that he's really very astute on. One is the story behind the Manson family.
Oh yeah,
he's done a lot of good work on that. Mm-hmm. And the other is on the JFK assassination. He's added an interesting slant on that. He's coming from a point of view that I'd never really thought about that much, but that was the associates of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yes.
In particular,
that's right.
Thornley. And I've read some of that stuff. That's very interesting.
Also, Adam contacted me after I had Joan on all those years ago, and he brusqued a little bit, but Adam is not about that. You know what I mean? When I say brusque a little bit, like his heart rate went up like one beat. And he said to me, he goes, well, I'm not so sure about Thornley. Anyway, as the way that Adam is, he said, can I contact Mellon? And I said, look, she's a very decent woman, a decent person. And,
She seemed to be.
Yeah, and I mean, if you contact her, she's going to come back. I mean, you're being serious, and she'll be serious. And they did communicate. But also, Andy Colvin got in on that and read Mellon's book as well. The two of them, I mean, Adam and Andy are associates, I would say, but, she did a good work, and they both looked at it, and even Adam modified his stance some. And I told Adam like this in my absolute fawning manner that what I liked about him was that, hey, if I got to be corrected or she can add something, I'm going to stand back and let that happen. Right. That doesn't happen with a lot of researchers. And that's what I like about
I really
them.
like, I don't know if that's in your, your plans or not, but I'd like to hear more about, more from Joan Mellon if you ever had
Yeah. Well, this would be a good time to do it because she's off her semester. She's a prof at Temple, and she's well, and that doesn't mean she's not doing anything, but it wouldn't be a bad time. But we'll see.
Yeah.
But I'll see what happens also with Adam. She said she was going to send along some documentation.
I heard that. I heard him talking about that, and I forget what the problem was, but he wanted to know where she had gotten some info.
Yes, and the whole idea too was about where she thought or she found Thornley was about. But I will tell you, and I think you'll admit to this as well, through all that we have ever done before you and I ever got together, and I got together with them, I had who the heck was Kerry Thornley?
Yeah.
When I had Adam come on, I realized that this is another player on the periphery, and I would say very much on the periphery, but in a way, when you think about the Kennedy assassination, anybody in the periphery, are they not in the whole deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's murky also, isn't it? There's a whole lot of crazy stuff that's taken place in the second half of the 20th century, which you and I, unfortunately, have lived through.
Yeah.
With any luck, won't go on much. No, that's anyway. All right. Thanks for doing all this. I mean, this is good stuff, and
no problem.
Okay, and I guess if I leave my number published, you'd call me again, won't you?
What's that?